The world is having fewer children. Numbers released only this week show just how far the decline has already gone. In England and Wales, new official figures indicate that births have fallen to their lowest level in nearly half a century. The fertility rate now stands at just 1.39 children per woman. That is a record low. In Sweden, a country known for generous parental leave and subsidized childcare, record low birth rates are now an election issue, with the prime minister promising expanded state-funded fertility treatments. And in India, the world's most populous country, the latest figures put fertility below replacement level. Now, that's the level required for populations to sustain and renew themselves without immigration. Across much of the world, people are having fewer children in low, middle, and high-income economies, and the pace of the decline is happening much faster than expected. So what is going on here? The desire to have kids is still there for many people, but other things seem to be getting in the way. A United Nations Population Fund survey found that nearly 1 in 5 adults of reproductive age expects to have fewer children than they actually want. The reasons cited: the cost of raising a child, job insecurity, unaffordable housing, difficulty finding the right partner, and fears about the future. Yes, those are huge worries, but what if our high-tech world is really the villain here? Could it be that modernity is responsible for our low birth rate reality? Smartphones, social media, and now artificial intelligence. Critics say they're weakening relationships and leaving us more isolated than ever before. In 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General even declared isolation and loneliness a public health epidemic. Well, my next guest is blaming high-tech, social media, and AI for a generation not making babies. Connor Leahy is U.S. Executive Director at ControlAI. He is an AI researcher, and he's also an AI critic. Connor, it's good to have you on the program. Let's, if you would, let's call them the terrible three: high-tech, social media, and artificial intelligence. What exactly have they done to people?
Well, that's a large question, isn't it? I think the whole modern world is defined by our relationship to technology. So I'm a technologist at heart. I've built technology. I've built AIs. I've built companies. I love technology. It's good, and it's brought us many very good things, but it's also extremely powerful. And there's one thing we've seen that has really shaped the last decades of our relationship with technology. It's been, well, I would say, a Wild West, a complete absence of regulation, from everything from, the early days of the internet to the era of social media, and now the era of AI, where private companies are allowed to build anything they want, including extremely dangerous technology that has clear effects on people of many, many sorts, and potentially even worse, with almost zero democratic oversight. That's really, I would say, is the story of the last couple decades.
But Connor, I have to, remind you that birth rates were falling long before anyone had smartphones, not to mention AI. I mean, why make technology central to your explanation of these low birth rates?
I would never say it was the only cause. I would think it's a contributor in the same way that there are many other threats that are affecting human society. But I would say that it's definitely the case that technology has, I would say, since maybe the 1990s or the 1980s, been one of the primary things changing our culture, our relationship to each other, and also really the geopolitical threat landscape. We're now at the point where we have, companies building technology, building AI systems, fully autonomous AI systems, sometimes called superintelligence, that could be smarter than humans. They're so dangerous that experts, including Nobel Prize winning scientists, warn us that they could even pose a risk of extinction to humanity. And this is not just through birth rates. Birth rates is already a large problem, but also through the direct effects of these technologies, as in replacing humans and outcompeting humans across the economy and in the military.
Well, Connor, what do you say to women who would say that, they have greater control over their own fertility now? I mean, Are you perhaps mistaking freedom for social decline when you talk about the reasons for these lower birth rates?
I think freedom is one of the great things that we have fought, very hard for many generations, to be able to make choices. But choices also have a part of a social structure. Is that, for example, I would like to have more friends. I would have to like more time with my friends. I would like to have more time to, build a family or to spend with children. But this is not necessarily something I can always afford or that I can necessarily do. Or even it can just be harder to find the right people who share the similar values to you. I'm not saying that there aren't many factors at play here, but it definitely, empirically, we can see that many people do want children and find themselves incapable or not able to afford or otherwise inhibited from doing what our ancestors, had apparently an easier time with.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. Finding a partner. Has digital life, has it damaged intimacy, dating, commitment, sex, marriage, and even parenthood?
I think it's pretty clear that it has definitely changed things to a large degree. The incentives of, say, a dating app are very different than, say, a party with your friends. The incentives of a dating app is not to make you find your best partner, because then you'd get off the app and you wouldn't be a good customer anymore. The goal is to keep you hooked on the app as long as possible. And they'll have all their engineers and their psychologists and all of their technology optimizing to make sure that you stay on their app as long as possible and pay as much money as possible. What I think here is really the story is how we took things that were cultural, that were part of our culture and our society, and we sold them to private companies. Dating and parties and these things used to be things that were between friends or that were within a culture. And now, basically no young people meet except over dating apps. This is now kind of weird. You're kind of already a bit unusual for this. And I'm not saying that anyone did this per se on purpose, but what has happened is that it has basically privatized the dating market. And do we really want the dating market of our young people in our society to be run by private for-profit corporations?
Well, you bring up a good point about people not going out. Here in Berlin, it's a big problem for all of the clubs and the discos. They're complaining that young people simply aren't going out anymore. And if we focus on technology, is AI reducing birth rates or simply making the future look less human, almost impossible to imagine a future for our children and our grandchildren? Is that what we're dealing with?
I think it's a mixture of both. The ways that technology and also the disembodiment from, say, internet affects people, it's in very deep psychological ways. It really affects how people relate to themselves, how they relate to their body, how they relate to other people. It's really shocking to me often how anxious young people are, how scared they are to take a phone call or to talk to someone in person and so on, and compared to many other generations. And as in terms of making the future look less human, yes, I think this is exactly right. As we're seeing with AI companies literally marketing that their goal is to replace all human workers and potentially all humans entirely forever with their products. And this is the explicit goal that these people are optimizing for. They're not optimizing for human flourishing. They're not optimizing for a world you or I would want to live in. They're optimizing for their bottom line. And often this is at the expense of many human intangibles. What is the cost of a young person having, a bad relationship to their body or having less friends? Who pays the cost for this? If we have AI systems that are more effective than humans, great. Maybe your company saves some money, but now a lot of people are out of a job. Is that the world we want to live in? Maybe, maybe not.
Let me play devil's advocate here for a moment. Your warnings about a possible future, are those warnings also making the future seem too frightening for children? The fact that we're talking about this so much, is that reinforcing the very future that we don't want to become reality?
I think our jobs as the adults is to make sure that there are good worlds that the children don't have to worry about. I don't want children to have to worry about these kinds of things. I don't want children to have to be, 12 years old on their phone and deal with predators. They should be protected from this. Children should not have to worry about this problem. It should be our jobs as adults to make sure that children can have a safe world and grow up safely. But meanwhile, we have these children, hooked up to these apps, run by extremely, predatory corporations that, are allowing just unbelievable amounts of abuse. We have AI chatbots literally, telling children to kill themselves and stuff like this, right? And there's no regulation, there's no oversight here whatsoever. I think we as an adults here are really also dropping the ball on giving children the kind of safety that they deserve to have a happy childhood.
Why should we be afraid, though, of a future where there are fewer people? I mean, it's true, we've got an aging world, but we do have the technology to pick up the slack, if you will, if we don't have enough people. But why is progress always equated with more and more, a growing population? Why can't we break out of that thinking?
I think there's two main categories here. One is that our economic systems are just not set up for this. I'm not saying we couldn't design economic systems or social security systems that can handle it, but all of our current systems absolutely break under this assumption. They are not handling this. We don't know how to do this. And then there's a second one, which is if we put our future into the hands of technology that we don't understand or control, it's very important to understand that current AI systems are not like normal software. They're not written line by line. There's no one at OpenAI who is telling the AIs to tell people to kill themselves. They would never do that on purpose. They're more like Rome. They're what's called neural networks that learn from data autonomously. And we don't really understand what's going on inside of them. If we build systems like this, that are super intelligent, smarter than humans, fully autonomous, and we let them, take over, not just elderly care, but all of the economy, production, military, etc., then the future will no longer belong to us. Humans will no longer decide the future. We will be at the whim of systems that we don't control, we don't understand, and that do not have our best interests. This is why our organization, ControlAI, advocates so strongly that we must prevent this future by creating international agreements to ban the development of such dangerous technologies before we know what we're doing.
Well, let's hope that your words of warning will fall on open ears, and let's hope the future will be better than we fear it might be. Connor Leahy, good talking with you. We appreciate your time and your interesting and valuable insights into the future. Thank you.
Thank you as well.